Many new and expecting mothers nationwide are still conflicted about getting a coronavirus vaccine, and many are forced to navigate through different opinions about the matter from health officials. New York-based journalist Anna Louie Sussman's latest piece for The New Yorker is about some of the challenges pregnant women are facing because of the pandemic, and she is here with us now to break it all down. Anna, thank you so much for being with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
So you spoke to women who are either expecting or recently had a baby. What are some of their concerns about getting the vaccine?
You know, the biggest concern for them is simply the lack of data that they need to make informed decisions. So, you know, one woman I spoke to is a nurse in California, and we should keep in mind that many women, in fact, in some fields, it's a majority, many women who are frontline workers and in the healthcare professions are women of reproductive age. You know, there was one woman who was trying to conceive. She's been through several years of really grueling assisted reproductive treatments like in vitro fertilization. And unfortunately, the timing worked out that the week that her hospital was getting shipments of vaccines was the same week that she was due for an embryo transfer. And, you know, as a healthcare professional, of course, she was monitoring the situation. It has tremendous ramifications for her own health and safety at work. But, you know, when the time came, she just didn't have the data to decide whether she was going to go ahead and get the vaccine, postpone the embryo transfer. You know, so she was forced to make these really tough decisions. And I think in her case, she just felt it was too risky to possibly affect her chances of conceiving. So she chose to forego the vaccine, do the embryo transfer, and just take extra precautions, meaning no lunch with her coworkers. Her husband took over all the grocery duties. And, you know, that's just the kind of decision she was forced to take in the absence of data.
You know, throughout this whole pandemic, Vlad and I have done a number of stories about how people will have to sort of wade through all this misinformation that's out there to try and find a credible source. It had in previous years been the CDC, but even the CDC has been, you know, there's been a lot of criticism about how they've handled the pandemic. And now, when it comes to this topic, the CDC doesn't seem to take a hard stance on whether pregnant women should be inoculated. It only basically states, well, people who are pregnant and part of a group recommended to receive the COVID-19 vaccine, presumably they have some sort of pre-existing condition or something, well, they may choose to be vaccinated. That doesn't help at all. It doesn't help women weigh the risk. Why isn't there more clear guidance?
Again, it comes back to this fundamental lack of data, which, you know, at its source comes from a delay or failure to include pregnant women in clinical trials, full stop. In fact, to participate in the phase 3 trials of the vaccine, you had to specifically not be pregnant. That was a criteria for participation. And I think, you know, I want to stress that a lot of the women I spoke to, they're healthcare professionals, they're smart, they're resourceful, they're curious. You know, they read the CDC guidance, they read guidance from ACOG. You know, they did their research and they did their homework. And at the end of the day, as you said, the statement is just not that helpful. I would say it's descriptive. You know, there's useful information and a helpful description of the current situation, which is we don't have the data. There are ongoing trials. Pregnancy, you know, they did stress that pregnancy does put you at increased risk for severe illness if you do contract COVID. So that's something to keep in mind. You know, but it's even though it's a kind of accurate and useful and thorough description of the current situation, it doesn't actually offer guidance. And it does say to talk to your healthcare provider. And some women felt like, well, what is the healthcare provider going to say? They have just as much information as we do, which is to say none whatsoever. But I think, you know, one doctor I spoke to saw his role, for example, as talking with the patient about what her risks are, what her exposure is it possible in her field to avoid risk, and helping weigh those risks and benefits for her. But it's still, you know, everyone is working with the same amount of information, which is to say none at all.
So this week, and Dr. Anthony Fauci, as you know, said roughly 20,000 pregnant women have been vaccinated in the United States so far, and he hasn't seen any complications. We also asked earlier on our air Dr. Bob Lahida his thoughts, and he said that he highly recommended women get immunized. I know it's tough because, even my own mom, who isn't getting pregnant, but, is one of those folks who's worried about the vaccine and has, had some concerns about it. I had to address those concerns for her. Would the information from Dr. Fauci and other medical professionals be enough to convince women or to at least address the concerns that they may have?
I think it is reassuring to hear Dr. Fauci say that. He has obviously a very reassuring demeanor, and he's a respected voice. But it's also reassuring to know that this is in people's crosshairs, that they are paying attention to it, that the FDA is concerned. However, that said, the way the regulations stand, and as far as I could tell from reporting this story, the FDA does unfortunately not have the power to require any drug developers or vaccine manufacturers to include pregnant women. They can encourage it. They can say, we care about it, but they really don't have that authority, in their regulatory powers. I should note that Senators Patty Murray and Elizabeth Warren have been really vocal on this issue, but to date, I haven't heard of any kind of regulatory changes or legislative efforts that would have passed that would make it so that the FDA can require this as part of approving a drug.
And a really quick question before we let you go about whether or not a baby is actually protected if their pregnant mother is vaccinated. Is there any research on that at all? As far as I know, we don't have any firm data on that, simply because the trials that are specifically around pregnant women they're still doing recruitment. I think maybe one might be underway, but we're kind of weeks, or you could even say months behind of when this could have started. There are vaccines that you get during pregnancy that do what's called, I believe it's called passive antibody transfers. So there's the Tdap vaccine, there's the flu vaccine, and these are really important because often, a newborn infant is often not eligible for a vaccine, can't get something until they're 6 months old or maybe older, and this is your best shot at protecting them from severe illness. So let's hope that that's something they're studying. I imagine they are, and that it does have that effect.